Crikey, that's scary for everybody, isn't it?
It is very scary, James.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so hi, afternoon, everybody. First of all, as all of us are working from home at the moment, I'm in a conservatory, which is a makeshift office. And when I was on the business bulletin earlier with Paul, the football for my children landed on the conservatory roof and just about scared the living hell out of everybody. So my kids are playing in the garden. If I end up shouting, it's because one of them has done something naughty, or if there's a big bump, it's because the ball's landed on the roof. Okay, so if I do swear, then blame my children, not me. That's all I can say. It's hardly likely to happen. They do fight a lot, bless them. So that's that. For those you don't know, afternoon, everybody. My name is James Blacklaws. Thank you very much to Paul Green for inviting myself to run this session, and frankly, for all the business bulletins that have happened this week. I mean, I've attended several, as I know a lot of people here have as well, and I found them very useful. I think the information's been great, the timing's been great, and also it's a great way to interact, isn't it? I don't know about anyone else, but sometimes I'm going a bit stir crazy here at home. So I found them really helpful and really useful. So thank you very much for that, Paul, and your support for the business community. For those of you who don't know, as I said, my name is James Blacklaws. I run JB Commercial Finance, which you can probably see in my banner here, a commercial finance brokerage based in Leicester. I've worked in commercial finance my entire working life, which is 17 years. And most of that was spent working for Lloyds Bank as a corporate manager, 11 years in Leicester. And I started my own brokerage in 2015. It'll be 5 years in June, if we get that far, that I've been running it. So I guess the point I'm making there is that I've seen the ups and downs in business finance over the last few years. I want to talk about business finance. It's anything from a multi-million-pound property development through to a £10,000 business loan for someone who needs a new vehicle. So it's the full range, it's a whole of market approach that I have. And so I do feel I'm pretty qualified to talk about this kind of subject, to be honest. And as an SME owner, as I think most of the people here are, they're especially concerning times. Obviously, a lot of our income has either dropped or vanished altogether. And the government have announced various measures to try and help guys like us. A couple of them don't really merit me talking about them at the moment. I mean, there's a grant scheme which has been agreed, up to £10,000 grant. So a lot of that's going through business rates. So that will come out in the wash and you'll be written to automatically about that. There's been a lot of talk about furrowing, which is a new word to most of us in the last week or so. That's something you probably want to talk to someone like Stephen Maber about, or an HR professional rather than myself. We should be getting some more clarification on support for self-employed people in tonight's announcement, but we'll wait and see about that. If you can hear the printer in the background, by the way, I think my wife's sending a worksheet through for the kids, so apologies for that. Another problem with working from home. But what I want to spend most of the time here talking about is the third real part of the government's £330 billion bailout, or whatever you want to call it, for the business community. And that is the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme, or CBILS for short. You'll find in finance everything has an abbreviation based on the title. So CBILS is the catchy term used to describe this scheme, and it's a significant part of the massive announcement that was made last week. And the scheme was launched on Monday, and so now we're in a position where we can go through what the scheme was set out to achieve, what the eligibility criteria for it is, and how it works. But now we're 3.5 days into it, we can actually see the initial scope of it, how it has been working, and whether it's fit for purpose. So that's what I want to cover in 3 points here. So the scheme was very simple, and I'm taking these quotations directly from the British Banking, the British Business Bank website. The scheme was designed to provide financial support to smaller businesses across the UK that are losing revenue and seeing their cash flow disrupted as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak. So very simple. If your business has suffered or come to a grinding halt because of this, then in theory you should be eligible to look at this scheme. That can range from a cafe, restaurant, pub, through to an events organizer, through to someone like myself, who all my lenders have gone to sleep and don't want to lend money anymore. So all of a sudden, my business has done that. A lot of us have, through no fault of our own. The scheme is obviously part of a wider government support package, but this is certainly a significant part of it. And there are several key features to this scheme. A business can apply for finance from anything from £5,000 to £5 million, so it's quite a wide scope there. There are no arrangement fees for the borrower with regard to setting up the scheme, and we'll be told it's at preferential interest rates, but that again is a little bit sort of screwed up, to be perfectly honest. The borrower always remains 100% liable for the debt, which is something which a lot of people have actually not really taken on board. This guarantee is not for the client. The guarantee which you're talking about is for the lender. So the idea is to allow the lender to want to actually lend the money to the client where maybe they wouldn't previously. And the guarantee is set at 80%. So if the loan was £100,000 in theory, if the government guarantee was in place at 80% and then the business toppled, then 80% of the outstanding balance would then be repaid by the government to the lender. That's the way the scheme is designed to work. A couple of great things about it that were announced. You'd have a 6-month capital repayment holiday, so no repayments to be made for 6 months, and a further 6 months of interest-only instalments. So the idea is it eases you into the facility. For 6 months you pay nothing, another 6 months you pay interest, and then a maximum term of 6 years, you then repay the loan back. So all that sounds great so far. To be eligible, you'd be UK based, very simple that one, an annual turnover of no more than £45 million, which again I assume probably covers most of the people on this conference. There are certain ineligible sectors for this, so but a majority of small business owners would be applicable to apply. And this is the key one really. Your business would be considered viable if it wasn't for the COVID-19 pandemic. So you'd be able to trade out of the current position with this finance and then continue to trade viably going forward. And that's the kind of key criteria here, that this money will actually save your business and allow it to be viable again. And unfortunately, that's open for a lot of interpretations. That's a little bit challenging. There are 40 lenders that have been approved onto the panel for this, including all the high street banks. And I listed that, I'll put the link up in the comment section at some point. A link to that is available off the British Business Banking website. In all honesty, a majority of those lenders aren't really fit for purpose here. So, for instance, a couple of them are asset finance lenders, and they'll only look at this if you're buying a new vehicle. So it'll help secure it if there's a new vehicle purchase. Well, who's buying a new vehicle at the moment? Nobody. So the reality is that we're talking about the high street banks here. So all the high street banks have signed up. So Santander, NatWest, RBS, HSBC, Barclays and Lloyds have all signed up to this scheme, along with a lot of secondary lenders as well. So the big players are there, and they're the ones who are going to, I imagine, receive around about 99% of the applications at this stage. And this is one of the fundamental weaknesses in the scheme, I would suggest. So, the point I want to make at this stage is actually something else, which was hidden in the small print, but has proved to be, again, one of the biggest obstacles, which I'll get to, and that's if a lender can offer the finance on normal commercial terms without making use of the scheme, it will do, then that's been quite problematic, because with this scheme, the banks have been allowed to take the scheme, apply their twists to it, their own criteria, and then send out what they're actually going to apply to their client base. So the guidelines have been taken by the banks to apply their own policies, their own preferences, their own interpretations, and then send it out to their clients, or then make the clients eligible for them. Because, again, one of the issues is, and one of the beauties of having my job is, I talk to the banks directly. So I talk to pretty much every bank manager every day at the moment, and they've all sent me their individual criteria for this of eligibility. And the majority of them are only receiving applications from existing clients. So if you bank with Barclays, you can only go to Barclays and their interpretation of the scheme. Same with Lloyds. You've got no freedom of choice, and that's a real limitation with regard to this particular scheme, because they're all looking at it very differently. So at this stage, I've spoken to several clients, and obviously I'm quite active on social media to look at this and see how the scheme is actually working. Because unfortunately in finance, a lot of the time we see the we see the theory, and the theory always looks great. Economists are great at theory. They're great at saying, this is how things work, this is a curve that shows this. It's a bit like looking at the corona stuff, isn't it? If we do this, this, and this, then the amount of cases will drop here. But you know, sometimes actually that doesn't work. And there's a little bit the same in finance. Sometimes you'll look at a scheme and you'll say, that looks good, that should work in this certain way. And unfortunately, by the time it hits the coalface, the guys who are actually administrating it, it's not the case. And there are certainly some teething problems so far. So the issues we're having so far are that the banks are basically ignoring the requirements with regard to security. Then they're taking, if a customer has some available security, they're insisting they provide that to the banks before they actually take this scheme into consideration. So effectively saying no to people who would have started. The biggest problem though is actually getting through to the banks at this moment in time. I'm hearing stories about 3-4 hour waits on telephones to get through to banks. I'm hearing emails being sent to email boxes getting bounced back because the box is full. Being managers getting dozens and dozens of voicemails and simply not having the time or resource to get back to their clients. So I would say to anyone, unless your need is absolutely urgent, then it's better to wait, because in reality, at this moment in time, you're going to spend half your day stuck on the telephone. But the other big question is about viability. So how viable is a restaurant that's shut at the moment? Who knows? There's a lot of guesswork involved. And one of the things the banks don't like and never have liked is guessing. They like things to be secure. They like things to be solid. They like to know they're going to get their money back. And at the moment, that culture change is proving a bit too much for them. And they're still saying no much too often. Despite this, I think that this could potentially be a very positive thing, which kind of feeds to the question of what support is available at this moment in time for small businesses. I think we're seeing a very big scheme, a very big change, a very big legislation that's been brought out, and I think it's going to take a bit of time to actually funnel through. I think more lenders are going to come on board. This afternoon I've been speaking to the funding circle, for instance, who have probably been the most prolific lender in the last 3-4 years, and they're desperately trying to get onto this scheme. So I think that once they get on board, assuming they do, and other similar lenders get on board, there's going to be a hell of a lot more opportunity for small businesses to actually apply for this finance. Because at the moment, it's not really fit for purpose. I think there's going to have to be a relaxation on the criteria for people to apply. I think there's also going to have to be some stern words said by the government to the banks with regard to actually applying the criteria and saying, yes, we know that the customer has some security, we know they've got assets, but that's going to take 2, 3, 4 months to actually get in place. And the business needs the money now to survive. So please get lending. So I think the government are going to be stricter with the banks to get them to do this. And I think that other lenders are going to come on board. In the meantime, my advice to anyone is, if you're not sure about your ability to actually survive over the next 3 months, then talk to a business coach, talk to your accountant, whoever's good for you, do it yourself, and put together a cash flow based on a best, middle, and worst case scenario. Now, if your worst case scenario is you're earning no money, then work it forward, work out how much you'll need to survive. Use someone like Margot Clark, who's good at that sort of stuff. Put together a cash flow, and then, yeah, absolutely, thanks, Jess. And that gives you a figure. And once you've got that figure, you'll know what you need to do. Now, how you raise that money, whether it's personally, whether it's via a remortgage, whether it's through the business, is entirely up to you. But I don't see a white knight coming over the hill to actually sort this out overnight. I think us business owners are going to have to be proactive in actually taking charge of our finances to make it work. Now, there are other lenders out there who aren't operating with this scheme, but because they're using investors' money or they're using their own money, they are still open for business. And I've got quite a few of them still on my panel who are still contacting me saying, you know what, we know this scheme's on board, we know businesses are freezing, but we are prepared to still look at cases on an ongoing basis. So there is still support out there via people like myself and other independent brokers and other lenders. You can do a simple Google search if you prefer not to use a broker to help. But I think we have to apply an element of realism to where we are in the market at the moment. I think we have to accept that us small business owners, all business owners, are going to have to be proactive, trying to find finance, trying to help ourselves, and the government aren't going to come and bail us out, certainly not before employed people, and certainly not before big business. And we need to get on top of things now and have an acceptance of the realities of the situation. Because while the scheme sounded wonderful, £330 billion, we're going to guarantee this, that, and the other, at the moment, it's incredibly chunky. You've got to put business plans together to apply for the finance. You've got to wait to get through. You've got to justify the fact that you don't have to give security. and the manpower at the bank's ends is simply not there to process the amount of applications they're getting at this moment in time. So my advice is be proactive, come to someone like myself. If you need money for your business, don't delay, because by delaying and delaying, the problem isn't going to go away. The bank aren't going to come and save you, and you need to actually take action. That's pretty much all I've got to say at this moment in time.
Very comprehensive, James. Okay, let's see if anybody's got any questions. So if you have got a question for James or a comment, like I say, just put your virtual hand up, or just put a comment in the chat room.
It's all gone quiet.
I know, James. Oh no, Stephen's got a question. Should we be afraid?
Yeah.
Let's. I'll unmute him and see what he's got to say. He's probably run out of Bourbons, right? Okay, Stephen, the floor is yours.
I just wanted to see how the raise hand button works.
I knew it. I knew it.
But it works well. It seems to work well. James, a bank making a decision to lend to a customer, they're going to be looking at their trading history in the normal way. That they'd want their probably 12 months management accounts, etc., etc. Is it the case that they are then just discounting, ignoring the effects, the impact of coronavirus for the purposes of assessing the loan and basing it on the previous history, or are they looking at the ongoing viability?
Well, it has to be viable beforehand and then viable afterwards. So that's where the interpretation comes in. So if you were a loss-making business, or if you're an insolvent business, or if you're a business who was barely breaking even, or had a declining trend with regard to your trading history, then you're not going to be accepted anyway. They're not going to accept business finance for businesses that would have declined in the best of times. So if you're a growing business, say if you're a business that's profitable beforehand, then certainly you're in a position to apply, as long as you can show that afterwards you'll be viable. So how you do that, well, that's up to the banks to interpret. And so some of them are doing it via business plans and cash flow forecasts, hence my comments earlier. Others are doing it basically based on the client's history, is just, and their word for it. I would say that if you are planning on applying for this finance via any lender, but especially via the bank, any of the banks, that you do produce a form of business plan and you do have that ready, because I think that, I know a majority are asking for it, and if it's a borderline case, they're certainly asking for it. So you need to be prepared with your information and you need to have it on hand if you're going to go to the bank. But yes, you have to show that the business was viable beforehand and will be viable going forward. And this is just a temporary blip, effectively, out of your control.
And linked to that question then, is it pretty much excludes, startup businesses, new businesses that have maybe, appeared in the last 6 months probably, for claiming anything?
This is not a scheme for startups. Okay, be very clear about it. This is a scheme for businesses rather than individuals. So if you are, as I am, a one-man band, and effectively my business earnings are used for my business expenses, but mainly for my lifestyle and my family, as I know a lot of people here will be. This scheme isn't designed to subsidise lifestyle. You'll need to demonstrate that you are an active business, you're employing people, and you're contributing to effectively the local economy. So the startup businesses who are on the way up and have just maybe got one person now and looking to grow, this isn't for them. And the businesses, the one-man bands from home, it's not for them either, no. So it's not for the startup. There are other schemes in place to help with that, but ultimately, if you're a startup business and it's always just you, then the idea is that if your business fails, you go and get a job or you claim universal credit. That's what the government effectively is saying.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Okay, John Kellett's got a question. John, I'll unmute you if you can sort of speak your question. John, you need to unmute yourself, I think.
Yeah, I've got to unmute myself this end as well.
Okay.
I made the mistake of only stepping back into my practice, which has been going for about 10 years, in January. So last year and previous years, I've had to resort to going back to working for people because there's not a lot of work. But when I can get contract work, and have done in the past, it's a good income, but it's not been, it's come through the business. But last year I was earning a good income, but it wasn't through the business. So, if the only help I can get is through KReative, it's essentially, although it's been going for 10 years, it's essentially a startup, because it is just me in the home office, no business rates, no employees, no VAT. I think the technical term is I'm buggered.
And obviously we're expecting an announcement tonight from the Chancellor to try and help self-employed people in exactly that position. You know, similar to myself, I'm a one-man band, limited company sole director, and this has been the big grey area, if you like, with regard to anything that's been announced by the government so far, because there's been nothing made for us with regard to lending support or any kind of claim. And I'll be honest, having had a conversation with Stephen Mather this morning about this, I don't think, and I don't know what your thoughts are, Stephen, but I don't think there will be any help coming for guys like us. I really don't. So, but buggered is a tough way of putting it. Obviously, I'm more than happy to have a conversation with anybody offline, as I am with you, John. But yeah, I think I think we all fall into a kind of a middle ground where we're not big enough to really get the kind of support of a scheme like this. But we're not, but because we run our own businesses, we don't generally qualify for the support that employed people are getting. So I do think it is a grey area, and I think it's going to be a problem for us small self-employed people over the upcoming days, weeks, and months. I really do. I'm struggling to see a solution to it, to be honest, other than some kind of universal credit scheme. And I don't know what someone like Stephen who's experiencing this thinks, but it's your timing's been bad, John. To be honest, with no fault of your own. It's one of those things. Isn't it?
Yeah,
But,
I mean this thing doesn't or shouldn't affect. Well, it doesn't affect what I can do. The pre-construction phases of any construction project are still going ahead. The problem is there's nothing coming in because other people have stopped requiring my services. 3 months is nothing if it comes, you know, it'll take longer than 3 months for something to go through planning and building regs. So there's no reason for my workload to drop, but it is doing because people are panicking.
I think you're probably going to get that initially, John. It feels like at the moment that there's a few people making rash decisions before they understand exactly what's going to happen. So hopefully it will calm down and things will get back to as normal as they can be. But yeah, let's see what the announcement is at 5:30.
I can't argue with anything you've said there. I mean, I'm the same. I've got businesses who are putting plans on hold for finance, and I've got businesses who approach me with finance, but I can't find lenders to actually lend to them because the lenders are gone cold. I think, well, why are people putting off 10-year decisions for something that hopefully in 3 months' time will have eased considerably? But unfortunately, human nature is panic sets in, and yeah, it's impacting on industries where you wouldn't necessarily think it would. And it's impacting on us all. So
we've got some more questions, James. Thanks, John. Jess.
Yeah. Thank you very much for clarifying a couple of things that I suppose is what I thought anyway. Was not said. My main question was really what would be the minimum required business plan in order to, because we're very busy at the moment, as we always are, in order to try and prove viability.
Well, that's how long is a piece of string, isn't it? So there's a number of things to consider there. So if you're borrowing £15,000, then you are going to require less of a business plan than if you're borrowing £3 million. If you're a business that was borderline viable, then you'll need a business plan. You'll probably be required for a business plan which is better than if you were a business who had been trading 30 years highly profitable. So I think the minimum requirement, and all banks are treating this slightly differently, but the minimum requirement will be a 12-month cash flow, 12-month P&L, plus a brief synopsis of the situation. And this is the key thing. This is the important takeaway from this: is how COVID-19 has affected the business. Because what the banks don't want to see, they don't want to see someone use this as an excuse to try and borrow money for no reason. So you have to say how this has affected your business, why it's affected your business, and how you're going to trade out the other side. They're the key points to any business plan relating to this.
Okay. The other question is, I mean, I think actually you probably have answered it about as much as possible, but the fact is any business plan that I might have made before COVID-19 is very different, and any forecast is very different. So inevitably, I don't know which clients might potentially pause, come on board. You know, I think confidence in the way that you were just talking about is very hard to predict, and it's not necessarily always very rational. So I'm not sure if there's anything further you can say other than to say how it's affected us and why. I think that's.
So was there a question there, Jess? Go on.
So the question was, or I suppose the musing and discuss was the forecast or projection that I would have made before COVID-19 is different as a consequence.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah.
I think the fact that the thing that's important here is to say how and why COVID-19 has affected it is about all I can do.
Yeah, it's about being realistic. If your business has fallen off the edge of a cliff, if you're a restaurant and you're shut, there's no point in saying your turnover is going to remain consistent, because it's not. This has been the impact. This is the reason for it, and it has to be linked directly to COVID-19. As I say, if your business was drifting down anyway, then you're probably not going to be accepted for a loan under this scheme, because sorry, there's comments keep popping up, because it's not an excuse. If your business was going downhill anyway for whatever reason, then it was going downhill. But if you can show that COVID-19 has had a direct impact on your business and the reasons why, and you back that up with a realistic cash flow forecast, then that's what lenders want to see. They want to see realism here. We all know that the world's fallen off the edge of a cliff. There's no point in pretending otherwise. But so if you can show that your previous business plan was X, it's now Y because of what's happened, but going forward you expect it to be back to X again, then that's what we need to display. We need to display you were viable before and viable afterwards.
So those things, just once more, you said 12 months cash flow, 12 months projection.
Everyone's different, but I say as a minimum you need 12 months cash flow, 12 months P&L, and a synopsis, if you like, of the situation on a Word document or similar.
Okay, Margot's had a hand up, and then Mark X had a question. I'll come to Mark.
Ignore Margot,
sorry. Margot.
Okay, just a couple of things. Yeah, I can see now, because I was kind of hoping there might have been a little bit of help for directors of limited companies. Yeah, there are a heck of a lot of small business directors that pay themselves the minimum salary and the rest in dividends. If we're not getting any help, that will mean a hell of a lot of viable businesses that will go under. Surely the government doesn't want that to happen, because they rely on us, a lot of us, for propping up the economy. So surely at some stage they're going to realise that we are going to need some help. Is it? I
don't really think the government care, and
really?
I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. But the government's primary concern, and they go through these things as a shopping list, don't they? What's most important? And they're deemed the most important thing to be employees. So employees are getting support. Then you've got big business, which will get support by another scheme, which is unrelated to this. And then you've got businesses that are going to continue, i.e. employing people, which will carry on. The one-man bands at home, or 1-2 man bands at home, I genuinely don't think it's a massive concern for the government, to be perfectly honest. And so I think we will slip through the crack. I said earlier, I think we're a grey area. I think we'll slip through the crack. I know that Stephen's got views on this, which I tend to agree with, about getting paid as a director of a limited company. I don't, as it stands, I can't see any support being put in place for it. So I hope I'm wrong, because I'm a director of a limited company. But I haven't got an answer for you on that, Margot, to be honest. I don't think there is the support coming for one-man band directors.
But surely, the bigger companies have got directors too. They'll be they'll get some help from the government. So where do you draw the line between a director of another limited company that just happens to, I don't know, be paying himself a bit more, and somebody like us who are also directors of a company? Surely there's got to be.
I haven't got an answer for you, mate.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
All right.
So this is one of the problems. So in company law, we always say
Who's that?
I don't know.
I hope that was a chair.
It wasn't me.
That was not me. So we always say you wear two hats. So you have your hat as a director and your hat as a shareholder. And in sole director companies, the problem is that's only you. And the government scheme isn't aimed at sole director companies. So if you've got a larger company that has 4 directors, then you can fill out 3 of them as employees, and they will be able to then subject to the government grant for the 80% funding for their salary, up to £2,500. But there's always going to have to be one, because a company can't trade unless it has one director. And like James, that's me in my company, and most of us will be the same. And so that's for employees and for companies. And then you've got the self-employed people. And I think tonight's package, and I hope that I'm proved wrong, but I think tonight's package is going to be aimed at more along the lines of the people that aren't incorporated, didn't take advantages of that. The plumbers and the tradespeople, the painters and decorators, where their income is 0, they will be getting something that amounts to a little bit more than universal credit, but not quite the 80% that employees are getting. There's a comment here, and sorry to kind of take control because that's just my nature. I'm really sorry, Paul.
I can mute you any time, Stephen.
I'm sure you can. The comment here from, and I don't know the name, OBFL, right? I don't know who that is, so my apologies. I don't know your name, but that's right. So, hi Roger. That makes sense. I know that initials now.
Obsidian, isn't it? Obsidian Finance. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you are an employee of a company, then yes, you would be entitled to be allowed and then claim that 80% grant, but not if you're a sole director. If you are the only director in the company, you can't do that, because if you are saying that you no longer are required to work, then there's no one that can reinstate you, because the company doesn't exist and the company can't make any decisions without a sole director. So it's only going to apply for if you've got additional directors, more than one, and you'll be able to get some.
Okay, so there are 2 directors.
If there's 2 directors, then you can allow one of them, and they're as an employee, their salary will be covered by the government grant for a 3-month period up to 80%. But you, as the main director, let's say, or the only director, there's not going to be you're not going to be able to get that funding.
So how do you, because my husband and I are both directors of our limited company.
Yeah.
Who is the main director then?
You have to make a call.
Okay. So you can make a call. There's not. I can make a call. Okay.
You make a call. That's one of those things where you would hope that you wouldn't fall out about it. But there's a risk. Yeah, exactly.
It's obviously you, Margot. It's obviously you.
Yeah, but you can. So one of you could nominate. Mine's saying my wife's not a director; she's an employee, so she would be able to be allowed and claim that grant if that's the route that I decided to take. But then me as an individual, I'm not going to get anything. And I think the point that James was saying is, look back, and I know these are keyword unprecedented times, but look back how the government have generally treated self-employed people. And it's pretty much like, well, you're on your own. You decided to go in business because you wanted to, and you get the good times. And then when it gets bad, well, you're on your own. And that's pretty much how the government is. And I'm just not sure that that they're going to come out and rescue us all, because fundamentally they want us all to have jobs anyway.
Right.
Also,
hold on, James.
Sorry.
Oh, Mark's been waiting quite patiently. Let me just unmute Mark. Mark.
Hi. It's interesting just hearing that last bit there, because I think the reality is that people become directors and pay themselves a minimum salary and then take dividends as a tax benefit. We all know that, and I am included in that. I think the point about what the government's trying to do is they're trying to preserve jobs. So if you are slightly bigger than a one-man band and you've got 2 or 3 directors and you're employing people, that is the government focus. And whether it's right or wrong, that is what they're trying to do. It's job retention. The point I just made when I typed in there when I was listening was, I think if you are allowed to furlough as a director, it will be on your salary, not on your dividends.
Absolutely.
So if you're on your 12.5, just for that number that as it is at the moment, your free pay is 12.5, then that's what they're going to furlough, that amount. The fact that you've taken dividends, I think where there's a complication here is if you have, say, 2 directors and 1 director carries on working, they wouldn't actually be able to take dividends because you've got to have an equal proportion of dividends if there are 2 shares in a business. So there's some complication there. But I think what they'll want people to do is try and tough it out for 2 or 3 months until they're able to pay themselves dividends again. I think that's what they're going to try and get everybody to do. But of course, it's not that simple. But at the moment, they're taking a helicopter view of it. It's a different.
The other thing, of course, is as small business owners, we're always doing something with our business. So I mean, this is marketing, for me, if you like. I don't know what you call it, but going to one of Paul's networking meetings, that would be working in the business, and therefore you're not, you're still working. So even if you were one of two directors and you tried to furlough one of you, if that person then goes to a networking meeting or does some social media work, are they still working in the business?
Yeah, they are.
They are, aren't they?
Work. Yeah. That is work. That's another key element of the furloughing situation, that you have to effectively switch the person off and only communicate via private emails and that kind of thing with them as an employee.
Which wouldn't happen with one-man band directors anyway. So
yeah, it's a very different situation as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, there's no easy answer to this.
Okay, thanks, gents, for your contribution. Anybody else? Any other comments or things you want to say while you've got James and others online? Stunned silence.
Well, I see Margot's put a question in. Margot, you want to ask that?
Oh, hold on. Let me unmute her. Sorry, I didn't see that. Thanks, James. There you go, Mark.
None of us know how to pronounce it, Jess. We're just guessing.
It's effectively a new word, Jess. So the employment lawyers up and down the country, when it was announced last week, Tuesday maybe, went, what's that word? We've never heard of it before. And started looking at all the law books and went, no, it doesn't exist because it's a new concept. So yeah, I think it's furloughed, and I think it's from horses, but I'm not quite sure.
No doubt it will be in next year's dictionary.
Yeah, word of the year. Word of the year.
Mark says it's furlough. There we go. We could be all day arguing how you pronounce it. Yeah, Margot, how do they check people are working?
Yeah, because a lot of stuff. Sorry.
Well, sorry. I'm guessing you'll only have an issue if you have an investigation, and an investigation will be, you can check on social media, by bank accounts, things like that, can't you? I mean, there's not going to be a perfect answer to it, but if I say I'm furloughing myself, and to say it was eligible for the repayment for the 80%, and then for some reason there's an investigation on me and they can see I was doing social media videos, or they check my bank account and had a couple of payments in, then I would imagine that would be seen as evidence.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, how do you prove anyone's not working? You telling me there are people who aren't going to be furloughed and then they're going to get a bit of cash in hand to still turn up to business? It's going to happen. It's going to happen. There's always going to be a way that people try and take advantage of the scheme, aren't there? Always.
Okay. Anything else from anybody? Either comment, wave your hands frantically, or whatever. I think your time might be done here, James.
Okay.
So thanks ever so much. I think this has probably generated the most Q&A. It's obviously quite a controversial and worrying subject for a lot of us. So, just do what you can out there. It's going to be a rocky road, certainly in the next few weeks, I would imagine. And let's just see what support comes through. But just sort of stay in touch. And I'm sure any of these guys on the call, Stephen, Mark, James, whoever, be more than happy to have an offline conversation if you want to explore it a little bit further. So thanks again, James.
No problem at all. Have a good day, everyone. Hopefully good news tonight, yeah?
Cheers.
Thank everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.
Yeah.